Hi guys, please like, share and subscribe. And if you want full course for any actuarial subject, visit theactuarialguy.com or WhatsApp on this number. Thank you.
Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to talk about subject CS1, that is actuarial statistics. I'll give you a subject overview and talk about how can you crack this exam. So I would give you a broad study strategy for both II and IFoA exam and tell you how to go about your preparation. So, what all will we talk about in this video? Firstly, we'll talk about the broad theme of subject CS1. What is subject CS1 all about? Why does IFoA or II even want you to study subject CS1? Then I'll talk about the prerequisites and dependencies on CS1. That is, a lot of times students reach out to me and ask, what are the topics of mathematics that I need to know before I start actuarial science, or particularly when I take up my first exam as subject CS1? What is it that I should have studied in my class 11 and 12 exam? What do I need to revise? Or if you are based in UK, you would typically ask what topics from A level mathematics are relevant for subject CS1. So that's what we are going to be talking about. And then I'll tell you what other subjects such as CM1, CS2, and CM2 use that comes out of CS1. What are the relevant topics here that are built on further in CM1, CS2, and CM2? I'll give you description of each of the topic of the subject CS1, and I will give you a broad idea of what is the amount of time it will take for you to cover those topics. Then we'll talk about what should be your exam study strategy for IFoA and IA respectively. We'll talk about the common mistakes that students often end up making while preparing for the subject CS1 exam. We'll talk about what are the other exams that you can take along with CS1, depending on whether you are in a full-time job, you're studying at university, or you're taking actuarial exams full-time. Then finally, I'll briefly discuss my course on subject CS1 and what all is included there, what are the services that I provide, right? So without further ado, let's dive right into it. First question, what is the overall subject objective? Why does IFoA or IA want you to study CS1? The objective here is to teach advanced mathematical statistics to actuarial students and the applications of it on R programming. So as most of you must know, the subject is divided into two parts. There is paper A, which is in case of IA, it's MCQ based. In case of IFoA, as of 2025 January, for the next exam, it's announced to still be a MS Word based exam, right? So you have to write out your answers. And then there's paper B, which in case of both Institute of Actuaries of India and IFoA UK is a R programming based exam, right? So one of the interesting things about CS1 is I did my master's degree in quantitative economics. I learned more mathematical statistics in CS1 than I did in my entire master's degree program, right? So that's how exhaustive subject CS1 is, and that is what you'd see in terms of when I discuss the syllabus as well. It exhaustively covers mathematical statistics, starting from the very basics of what a random variable is, going all the way up till the Bayesian credibility theory, right? So it's pretty vast in terms of its scope, despite being one of the smallest exams out of the CSCM exams that we have, right? Now let's get into what are the prerequisites for CS1 and what are the dependencies on CS1 for other subjects, right? So for studying CS1, what are the topics do you need out of your A-level mathematics? These are topics that I have not covered in my videos, and I have assumed that you have already acquired knowledge of these. If you are coming from a background where you haven't studied these topics, or you haven't done A-level math or your plus 2 level mathematics, I would say you just go through these topics. They should be sufficient enough for you to start studying actuarial science and take up CS1 or CM1, right? So the topics are listed here. The first one is called sequence and series. Here we talk about arithmetic and geometric progressions. And some of the topics that are relevant are that you should know how to calculate the sum of an AP or a GP. You should be able to derive the nth term, the expression for the nth term, and all of those things. So they are fairly basics, right? They are the first one or two topics that are covered in any sequence series course, right? So these things you should know. Then one thing that you need in a lot of detail is calculus, right? So you would need to know differentiation and integration well. The subtopics I've mentioned in a lot of detail here, right? So you can just go through them. One important thing to note is that trigonometry and trigonometric function are not under the scope of actuarial science. So even if you go and study calculus for just for starting actuarial science, you need not cover trigonometric functions, right? So you can just skip them. Finally, permutations and combinations is something which is important. You should just know how to evaluate basic permutation combination functions, and you should be able to interpret permutations and combinations primarily from an objective of evaluating probabilities, right? So that is the scope of PNC, that is relevant for actuarial science and for subject CS1 particularly, right? So these are the three topics that you need from your A-level math. Apart from that, there are three more topics which are prerequisites. These three topics I've covered in detail in three prerequisite videos that I have made for subject CS1. The first one is your set and probability theory. I've covered it in a lot of detail, so I'm not getting into it here, although I've just mentioned the topics that are relevant. You need to know the theory of random variables, what a random variable is, how to get expectation variances, what are moments, what are probability, density or mass functions, what's the difference between a discrete and a continuous random variable, all of these things. So these things I've covered in a lot of detail in my random variable video. I will put the link to that in description. And finally, you need to know descriptive statistics. So you need to know the idea of central tendency, that is mean, median, mode. You need to know what measures of spread are, such as variance, standard deviation, all of that. You need to know what the idea of skewness is, right? So these are some of the topics which are required in order to understand subject CS1 well. And these three topics that are marked in purple here, all of them I've covered in separate videos, so you should go through them. Apart from that, you also need to know how to use your scientific calculator. That is the one that is typically used by students with either Casio FX82 ES Plus or Casio FX 991 ES. So you can use either one of those. For that, I have made 3 calculated tutorial videos also, for which I've put the link in the description to this video. So you should check all of that out. Now that is all the knowledge you need in order to start CS1. Once you do CS1 and you are writing your further exams, some of the topics from CS1 that are relevant for your further exams would be for CM1, you need to know the theory of random variables, you need to know how to calculate expectations and variances. For CS2 and CM2, you need a bit more. You also need the entire unit of inference, that is hypothesis test and confidence intervals, because that is required for a certain topics in CS2 and CM2. You need to know what regression is and how it works for certain topics in CS2 and CM2. And obviously you need the random variable and expectation variance theory, right? So CS1 is the foundation on which CM1, CS2 and CM2 particularly built, right? Let's move on. Now I want to get into what are the individual topics covered under the subject CS1. Overall, CS1 takes anything between 150 to 200 hours of study to cover. This would depend on what is your background and whether you're taking the IA versus the IFoA exam. The IA exam tends to take slightly longer, but your typical study hours would be anywhere between 150 to 200. On the lower side if you have a background in mathematics and if you're taking the IFoA exam. Now let's get into what do we study here. The first unit here is related to data analysis. There's only one chapter here which is called as data analysis. It'll just take you 2 hours to cover. It talks about what does it mean to analyze data, how do you derive meaningful insights from raw data, what are the different types of analysis, descriptive, inferential and predictive analysis, what does big data mean, right? That's a very popular term these days. And what does reproducibility of data analysis mean, which basically implies that if you have done a data analysis, someone should be able to replicate it again for it to be a good data analysis. Otherwise, there was some sort of bias in your data analysis, right? Very straightforward, simple theoretical unit, takes 2 hours to cover. And the time to cover that I've mentioned here includes paper A as well as paper B, although there's no paper B related to this unit particularly. The second unit is related to probability distribution. There is just one chapter again, but this is slightly longer, so takes about 10 hours to cover. Here we talk about the different standard, discrete and continuous probability distributions that can be used to replicate real world phenomenon. And then we learn about Monte Carlo simulation, which is basically simulating random values out of these probability distributions, right? So very interesting unit, very straightforward. This is covered in my demo lectures on YouTube, so you can just go and check it out. Next, we get into generating functions, which are basically functions which are used to generate probabilities, central and non-central moments for a given random variable. Again, very straightforward unit, very easy, just take about 8 hours to do this for paper A as well as paper B. Then we get into joint distributions, which are basically the distribution of more than one random variable. So now, so far you were just working with one random variable, but what happens if there are two random variables and they depend on each other? So how do you get the probabilities and expectations of joint random variables is what is talked about in this unit. Slightly longer, take some practice, so give it 10 hours. Then the next unit is related to central limit theorem and statistical inference. So CLT or central limit theorem is just a theorem which states that if you take a large enough sample, then the sample mean of that has a normal distribution with a certain expectation and a certain variance, and that is what the CLT is. So we talk about what CLT is and we talk about its explanation. Some of these terms and notations might seem slightly intimidating to you, but again, once you get into it, it's fairly straightforward and very beautiful mathematics that pertains to these topics. So you would not have a lot of problem. These are again very easy topics. Then we get into the distribution of sample means and variances and how that can be used to derive statistical inference. So let me just detail on that. So what that means is that if you have a sample and if you want to infer something about the large population out of which this sample has been derived, how do you do that? What distributions of the sample do you use to derive inference about the population? That is what sampling and statistical inference talks about. Then we get into point estimation, which basically talks about how do you estimate a population parameter, a population's certain attribute based on a sample's statistic, a sample's attribute, right? So if any attribute related to a population is called as a parameter. So if you want to estimate that using a sample, how do you do that? That is point estimation. And here we have 2-3 methods given to conduct point estimation. And then we talk about the distribution of the parameters of large sample. That's the second half of this chapter. What happens if we have a very large sample? How are the parameters basically distributed there? Next, we get into confidence interval and hypothesis testing. So in point estimation, what we were doing was for a certain parameter, we were estimating a point, a single value that, the most likely value for this parameter is this. But under confidence interval, we give a interval or a range of values. Okay, we say that the mean of this population lies between 10 and 15 with 95% confidence. That is the kind of statements we make. So here you have interval estimations and not 1-point estimation, right? And this actually builds on this previous unit related to sampling and statistical inference. We use the same distribution that we had derived there in order to get confidence intervals of certain population parameters. And then the next unit is the next topic within this unit is related to hypothesis testing, which is basically testing certain hypotheses about a certain population parameter. So this is used a lot in the real world, particularly in the world of research, where a lot of times empirical researchers start with a certain hypothesis. Let's say they've discovered some drug that is able to cure a certain disease, right? So in order to check whether the drug has a statistically significant impact in improving the disease or not, they would typically use a hypothesis test. So hypothesis tests have a lot of application in the real world. The next unit is related to correlation and regression. These are topics you would have heard about. Correlation basically means the degree of relationship between two variables. How do they move with each other? What is the mathematical relationship between them? And then we talk about linear regression, which means that how do you predict one variable given the value of another variable, assuming that there is a linear relationship between the two. Linear relationship basically means that you can express the relationship like a linear equation, right? And then the next topic is related to multiple linear regression. That is what happens if you have more than one variable on which a particular variable is dependent, right? So that is what we talk about in this unit, correlation and regression. The next topic is related to generalized linear model. This is probably the only topic which is sort of challenging in this entire curriculum. This has wide applications in general insurance. It is used to this date, although this is a technique which was discovered long ago. It is used to this date for pricing, particularly in general insurance. Basically, these are models that are used to depict non-linear relationship between non-normal variables. So in the previous unit we were talking about linear relationship, and eventually we assume a normal distribution. A normal distribution is a certain kind of distribution that operates with real world phenomena. So we assume a normal distribution and a linear relationship, and then we do predictions. Here under generalized linear models, we do not assume linear relationships, all normal distribution, and then we do predictions. So this has a lot of applications in the real world. The good thing about these models is that they are very explainable, as against complex machine learning models. So those are the new kind of models that are used in pricing in general insurance, and they're machine learning and neural networks based models. The problem there is that explaining those models to your stakeholders is very complicated. These are models which are older, the generalized linear models. They can be applied in a machine learning context as well, but the beauty of them is that they still remain very explainable. So you can actually explain a certain result better to your stakeholders when you're using a GLM. Then we get into Bayesian statistics and credibility. So Bayesian statistics is all about predicting a particular parameter given some prior knowledge about that parameter and a sample that you have. So far we were just inferring about population just based on a sample, right? Now what we are doing is we are saying, okay, I want to make predictions about a population parameter, but I have this sample, but I also have some prior knowledge. How do I incorporate that prior knowledge in order to make this prediction? So that is what Bayesian statistics and credibility theory is about. Again, there are 3 chapters here, straightforward chapters, easy to do, takes about 25 hours because there are 3 chapters. So that's your entire syllabus for subject CS1. Okay, now let's talk about the exam strategy for IFoA. Uh, this is broadly similar as it is for other CM and CS exams. So I always recommend a very similar strategy of how you should go about studying for CS and CM exam. The pattern of the exam I've already told you. Paper A for IFoA is MS Word and paper B is R programming. For II, this is MCQ. Paper A is MCQ. Weightage for both institutes is same, 70-30, right? For II, the pass mark is always 50%. IFoA, they define the pass mark by making a qualified actuary take the exam, and based on that, how they perform, they define the pass mark, right? That has always been their strategy. Now, how do you go about studying? First, you watch my lectures and then you skim through the CMP. So in my lectures, I've covered each of the topic in a lot of detail. I've solved some questions there as well. So that will give you all the conceptual clarity that you need in order to understand each and every topic really well. I've also covered some exam questions there. Then you solve combined material practice questions. A lot of these I've covered in my videos, some of them I've not. So what you do is you go to the back of each chapter in the combined material pack, and they have given questions. They've marked some questions as exam style questions as well. They are very important from an exam point of view. You solve them. Then, in order to revise, the best resource to revise these exams is fact sheet. These fact sheets are given within the revision notes at the back of every unit. So what you do is you read through these fact sheets in order to revise your topics that you have studied through my lectures and by going quickly through the CMP. These fact sheets will also come in very handy near to the exam. That is when you can quickly revise through them. Then once you have read the fact sheets, quickly you have gone through all the formula and exam concepts that are given in the fact sheets which are relevant for a particular unit, then you start solving the revision notes. For revision notes for IFoA, I always recommend what you do is you solve 50% on paper by writing and 50% you solve on Microsoft Word so that your Microsoft Word typing practice is taken care of. Revision notes is nothing but past 20 attempt exam questions with solutions. This I have given you up to 2020 exam. So you have them from about 2010, 2011, right? So this will give you a good practice of past exam questions which are relevant for your upcoming exam. You keep on doing this for every unit. So for each unit, what you do is you go through my lectures, skim through the CMP, solve CMP practice questions, you use the fact sheet to revise, and then you solve the revision notes. And when I say one unit, I mean one booklet of the revision notes. Each unit is defined by one booklet of the revision note. So for each booklet, you can follow this plan in order to get your concepts very clear and have a good exam practice as well. Now, this is your first time going through the syllabus. This is how you do it. This is your preparation. Now, let's get into the revision strategy. So, for revision, again, you go to the fact sheet, you read the fact sheet. So, you have gone through all the formulas and techniques relevant for the exam. You solve questions, you solve past exam questions in the revision notes again. This time, you focus more on the question that you got stuck on the last time, right? So where while going through the revision notes, wherever you got stuck, you can mark those questions, and during your revision, you should go through those questions, right? Where did I get stuck? What was the mistake I made? All of that, right? And you should compare it against the suggested solution. In the revision notes, they have given detailed solution as expected by IFoA. So you can actually compare your solution against there, and wherever there was a discrepancy where you did not get the right answer, you should review it, right? Now you have done paper A once and revised it as well. Right now your concepts are very fresh. So what you should do is you should watch the R programming lecture at this point for a given unit and solve the R programming questions and Y assignments, right? So this will help you, since you have already recently done the topic, it will be very easy to understand the paper B unit related to the same revision note booklet, and it would be very easy to solve those R programming questions, because R programming is nothing, it's just the application of the paper A concepts onto R, which is a software, right? So software is important, but what is more important is your concepts. If your concepts are clear, you will be able to apply them easily, right? So during your revision you should do the R programming portion. That way you also have a whole picture of the entire syllabus, because you have gone through the entire curriculum by this point and you have only recently revised paper A. So you're able to do R programming easily. So with this, your preparation is almost complete. Now you are closer to the exam. So closer to the exam, what you do is you solve X assignments if you have time. We are right now in 2025. By this point, since 2019, since the curriculum has changed, the latest curriculum has taken effect, there have been about 11 exam attempts for IFoA. 6 exam attempts you solve under exam condition. Okay, so you sit down, 3 hours and 15 minutes for paper A, 1 hour and 45 minutes for paper B. You solve them properly under exam conditions. You type it out on Microsoft Word and do it on R programming and compare your answers against that suggested by the institute, right? So that's how you do this. And for 5 exams, what you can do is you can quickly skim through the IFoA papers and solutions, right? So that will just give you a good, practice of the latest exams. So that is your entire exam strategy for IFoA. Now let's move on to IA. Yeah, and one thing is that if you do not enroll for my lectures and you do a self-study, instead of my lectures and skimming through the CMP, you should go through the CMP properly at least twice. At least twice is needed in order to get the concepts clear. And that's where my lectures come in. They make it breezy for you, that you can go through the CMP much faster and cover all the concepts in a lot of detail, right? Now moving to IA, the strategy is very similar. The only thing is that I would recommend a couple more things. Since this is an MCQ exam, your focus should only be on the final answer, right? And not on the method, right? You need a much higher conceptual clarity for II. So I would recommend that you do more practice, right? So you definitely solve X assignments. You go through II papers post 2019, and you do the R programming portion properly. Again, focus on the final answer. You skim through IFoA paper exams post 2019 as well, and you solve the R programming portion. So for R programming, you get a good practice by solving both IA and IFoA, right? For MCQ practice, I would suggest 2 things. Since May 2024, they have moved on to an MCQ kind of a format. So 2-3 attempts you will get MCQ question practice. So you should solve the II papers since May 2024. You should also go through SOA, Society of Actuaries. This is the United States-based society. You should solve their exam P sample question bank for MCQ practice. They have it on their website. You can just go check it out. Exam P has a significant overlap with the CS1. Again, you need to be careful. A lot of topics there are not relevant for CS1. So if you go through it, you'd realize what is not relevant, leave that out. But whatever is relevant, you can solve those questions. I will also make a question bank using the SOA questions. So I'll include that into my material, right? So that should be your strategy for IA. Okay. So let's talk about the common mistakes that students make while doing the CS1 preparation. The top one is cramming formulae, and coaching institutes are to be blamed for this because they are only exam focused. So what they do is they make you cram the formulae, they make you solve 10 questions and pass the exam somehow. I don't think that's the right way to study actuarial science. First reason for that is that you would not enjoy the subject. It will become very boring for you. You'll just look at exams as a box to check. Secondly, in order to apply these concepts in real world, you would fail because you don't understand them fundamentally. And finally, some of the exam questions, particularly for II, tend to be very first principles oriented, so you won't be able to solve them if you have just crammed formula and you have not understood the concept. You would make a mistake there. So don't cram formulae, understand the concepts and the derivations intuitively. The other two mistakes are that they either ignore Microsoft Word typing practice, so they are not able to type in the exam. They are not able to complete their exam paper. That is a major problem with all CSCM exam. And finally, they ignore our programming portion. They think that they'll just manage based on paper A. If you have a bad day on the paper A exam, then you have nothing to compensate there. Focusing on our programming, because that is 30% of the portion, is very helpful to get a good aggregate score and ensure that you pass. And sometimes paper A tends to be difficult and our programming portion tends to be very easy. So in that case, it won't help if you have not done R programming, because you would do badly on paper A, it was difficult. You would also end up doing badly on paper B because you have not done R programming. So don't make these mistakes. Then there's a question often that what are the exams that I can take along with the CS1? I've mentioned based on where you are in your life and how much time you have. If you are preparing for exams full time and you love challenges, I would say definitely go for CS2 or CM1 along with CS1. If this is what you're doing full time and you are, pretty thrilled to take multiple exams, you should go for CS2, CM1. If you have, a job on the side, or if you are still at university or grad school, I would say then take CB1, CB2. If you have a lot of time on your plate, if you have like more than 5 months, then you can take CS2 or CM1. I would recommend CS2 over CM1 because CS2 is a shorter subject and CS1, CS2 are very related to each other. Both are very statistically oriented paper. Both have R programming, right? So that overlap really helps you cover them faster. So if you have a lot of time on your plate and you do not have other commitments, I would say go for CS2. Otherwise, take CB1, CB2. These are very straightforward theoretical exams. You can do them alongside CS1 very, very easily. No problem at all. Okay, now let's talk about my course on subject CS1. So first, let's get this out of the way. Do you even need coaching? Not necessarily. You can definitely study for these exams by yourself. I have studied for all my exams by myself. So you do not need coaching. So why go for any coaching? What is the role of a tutor? I think a tutor does three things for you. The first and the most important thing that a tutor does is to make you fall in love with the subject. These are very beautiful mathematical exams, particularly the CS and CM exams. They are a lot of fun to do. And you would really enjoy these subjects if you would understand them well. So that is one thing I can ensure you, that I would make you really love the subjects. You would start enjoying them, and I would try to brush up your intuition and your mathematical thinking. So that is what I would help with. The second role of a tutor is to help you cover the syllabus faster. It is very difficult to go through the dense acted material on your own. While you can do it obviously, but it's very difficult to go through it on your own. So a tutor helps you cover the syllabus much faster. So that is definitely an advantage of going for tuition. The third advantage is that a tutor can help you see latent patterns in the curriculum, because I have gone through this material many times. I've taught it many times. So I have seen patterns in the material that would you miss your life the first time. So I would help you see those. And I would obviously, since I've worked in the industry for a long time, both in actuarial and data science kind of roles, so I would talk a lot about the industry applications. So that is the role of a tutor. If you want these advantages, you should go for tuition, but go with someone who doesn't make you cram formula. Go to someone who actually inspires you to study these subjects properly and teaches you the logic and intuition of every concept. So many big coaching institutes, why should you trust me? I think you should just watch my demo lectures, and that is how you would know why you should trust me. Problem with a lot of coaching institutes is that they're only commercially driven. So they only care about helping you pass the exam as fast as possible, and that's the only agenda. That is also our agenda, but we focus on the concept and the intuition a lot. Also, with coaching institutes, there is a lot of moral issues. They make a lot of false promises in terms of what the profession offers, what the job pays are, all of those things. So there are a lot of moral compromises there, right? So I would say that is a good reason why you should choose me. Um Finally, this might not matter for all of you, but all my lectures are in English. So if you are based outside India, or if you are based in the south of India and you're not comfortable with Hindi or English, which is the language that most coaching institutes teach in, my lectures would always 100% be in English. So you can go for them without any problem. Now, what is included in my lectures and how to enroll? So my course covers all of these things. I would give you video lectures covering all topics in detail with derivation and intuition. We would have regular doubt solving sessions. These are mostly on demand. So if you ever have a doubt, you can reach out to me and I'll solve that doubt, whether through video or we can connect one-on-one. Or for some difficult topics, we can also have group sessions. So that is my way of solving doubts. You will be added to a WhatsApp community where you can ask all of your doubts, and that'll ensure that you don't have to tread this journey alone. You can have like study partners and all of that. We will solve past exam questions in video and textual format, right? So I would make a lot of videos and I will provide you with the revision notes, which are essentially past exam questions solved in the textual format. I am now making typing tutorials for IFoA exams. So my CM1 course already includes that. CS1, I'm still adding them. Whenever you enroll for the course, they'll be included. And I'm adding a lot of MCQ questions with solution. So all of these things are actually included as a part of the course. Mock exams, I have made some and added them in the course, but I do not do mocks where I invigilate you and I check the papers, because I believe in self-paced and self-motivated learning programs. So I do not do that, in case that's a question, because a lot of students ask that. And how do you enroll? To enroll, you can visit theactuarialguy.com or you can just reach out to me on WhatsApp. So yeah, that's all. Thanks a lot. Cheers.